Thank you so much, Agnes. And let us proceed with the next presentation. And this one is by Reza Moosavi Mohseni, who is the professor in the Auckland University in New Zealand and also the chief economist at the Planning and Budget Organization in Iran. And the presentation is about the choice of inflation targeting regimes for inclusive growth. What are the lessons from the southern countries? Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Before I start, I should be thankful from the Dock Institute to give us this opportunity to gather here and talk about one of the most important, I think, one of the most important subject in macroeconomics policy. And today I want to talk about the choice of inflation targeting regimes for inclusive growth, lessons from southern countries. So at first, I have some introduction about that. We know that the strategy that the central bank adopted to conduct monetary policies highly affected the health of the economy. So, and I believe mathematically in Tinbergen 1952 that showed that there is a relation between the number of the instruments and the number of target, and we should accept this relationship. There is an agreement among economists that today that short-term interest rate is the instrument for monetary policy, and the stable price level should be the monetary policy target. Since New Zealand, the country that came over there, adapted the inflation targeting, I think one of the most important improvement happened in monetary policy framework, inflation targeting. And this monetary approach aims primarily to achieve the price stability and, of course, to achieve a single-digit inflation as New Zealand work on it. Even though some economists criticized this framework, maybe Stiglitz is the most important person, the empirical article reveals that this framework can lead to a better monetary framework to conduct a monetary policy. And if you would like to read, you can read papers from Ben Bernanke and, of course, Mishkin talk a lot about inflation targeting. The objective of this paper that I want to talk about, that it's at first to find that whether the inflation targeting has been able to boost economic growth in some selected southern countries, and after that, if so, because it's important at first we understand that if the inflation targeting can increase the growth. If this happened, after that I want to find that what is the best choice of inflation targeting regime here. So we know that monetary regime can be defined as a nominal target or nominal anchor. A nominal anchor is a variable that's used to pin down the general price level and, of course, serve as a target for monetary policy. This is the important things that we should talk about that. So what is our nominal anchor? It should be very effective nominal anchor. And this definition of nominal anchor for a monetary regime proposed the following different regimes. Exchange rate, you know about that, money aggregate or monetary aggregate, inflation targeting, and nominal GDP targeting. And we know that the last one, officially no country used the last one, but really use it, because most of the central bank would like to, as one of our friends talked about that, would like to have a dual targeting. And nominal GDP targeting is a dual targeting, target inflation and real GDP, both of them at the same time. So sometimes the central banks in New Zealand, they use really nominal targeting, not inflation targeting. And they said that just do it and don't talk about that. It's because they told us that the inflation is the most important things that we should think about that, and unemployment is not our problem. But they think about that most of the time. So the country that We work on it in this paper. The classification is like that. We have 14 countries here. 9 of these 14 countries has inflation targeting. And between them, Chile, Brazil, as Professor talked about that, has a very special story from inflation targeting and how they can achieve a lot of success from inflation targeting since 2000. And between these 9 countries, India and Kazakhstan start inflation targeting from 2015 and 2016. But all of the other countries, 9 countries are inflation targeting. 5 is non-inflation targeting. At the first step, in order to capture the impact of IT or inflation targeting on economic growth, we estimate the following regression, a panel regression. As you look at here, the real GDP growth is a function of the gap between actual and potential output, budget balance or government budget balance as a share of GDP, and BM or broad money as a share of GDP. And we choose all of our, or we gather all of information from the IMF data set, IFS. So after that, we employ some descriptive statistic to analyze the choice of inflation targeting regimes, because we have some sub-regimes for inflation targeting that very soon we talk about that. And in this descriptive statistics that I would like to present here, just 3 of them. You can find more than that in the paper. The Financial Development Index, I use the stock market total value traded to GDP. Central bank independence, Dr. Behruz wants to talk about that very soon. And government budget balance to GDP. This is the 3 important descriptive data that we would like to talk about that after that regression. So now, what is our result about the growth and inflation? So maybe I should talk with Professor Assis about some results that he has. He talked about that. So as you look at here, I start with a very simple regression in column 1. Just growth rate as a function of DIT. I forget to talk about that. DIT is just inflation targeting dummy variable, because if it would be positive, which means that inflation targeting has a positive impact on growth, or if it's negative, which means that it doesn't have. In column 1, and after that I add broad money to GDP, and after that government balance to our regression, and this is the most important result is here. But if you look at here, you can find that the dummy variable, the coefficient of dummy variable here, all of them are positive. This means that inflation targeting can increase. It means that changing from the other regime to inflation targeting can increase the economic growth. So, and at least for these selected countries that we have here, this happened here. And if you look at here, most of the T statistic is reported in the brackets, so which means that most of them is statistically significant. So as I told you that the positive DIT coefficient in all models show that the adopting of inflation targeting framework had a positive impact on economic growth. Inflation targeting is superior to at least 2 of that target regime that we talk about that. It's superior to at least exchange rate and monetary aggregate targeting in selected southern countries. Just I'm talking about these 2 because we don't have any idea about nominal GDP targeting, No country talk about that. So, which means that the first step is the things that we would like to see. So, inflation targeting is acceptable as a variable, as a framework that can increase the economic growth. So, before I start to talk about the descriptive data, it's better that I talk about the sub-regimes that we have in inflation targeting regimes. In this sub-regimes is defined by clarity and credibility of the central bank to the target, which means that when we have a high credibility, which means that the commitment of the central bank to the target is very high. And when we have a high level of clarity, which means that the accountability of the central bank to the public is very high again. So, if this is the case, we have 3 different sub-regimes in inflation targeting. The first one is full-fledged inflation targeting with a medium to high clarity and medium to high credibility and medium to high clarity and credibility. So, this full-fledged is a country like New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. They have full-fledged inflation targeting. The second one is inflation targeting light, a relatively low level of credibility and low level of clarity. And countries with this regime has a relative shallow financial market, always show shallow financial market and fragile banking system. So this is the inflation targeting light. Some countries, a lot of countries is in this category. For example, Brazil and Chile at the first step when they want to transit to inflation targeting. Oh my God, what happened here? They had an inflation targeting light. For transient, as we soon talk about that, for transient from non-IT to IT regime, it's not bad to use inflation targeting light because step by step, gradually, we would like to increase our clarity and credibility. But implicit price stability is the situation that we don't have any explicit anchor. Here, we have explicit anchor, the inflation. But here, we don't have any explicit anchor. But we don't know that the countries here accept inflation or price stability as an anchor, like the United States of America or the European countries. They are here. So, in this situation, in this framework, we have a high level of credibility, so which means that the central bank of these countries has a high commitment to the target without talking about that. But the clarity is medium to low, which means that they don't have any accountability. They don't think that they are accountable to the public to talk about the target that they have for their monetary policy. I want to have an example. In New Zealand, when you say that, okay, our target is between 1% to 3%, this is the target that we have in the statement in these years. So, and it's New Zealand, when they talk about the target, no, they talk about the 5 minutes, and I think how I can finish it. So, when they talk about the target, the head of the central bank come and talk about that target to all the people in TV or radio or something like that, and said that this is my target, a high level of clarity. They talk about that to the public, and you know that if they cannot meet the target the prime minister can change the head of the central bank very easily, very soon. So, which means that they have a lot of clarity and a lot of credibility. So, if we look at here, we can see that the Financial Development Index, government balance, and the central bank independence calculated for all 14 countries. The red one is the IT countries. If you look at here, you can see that most of these countries, except China or maybe South Africa has another good story about the inflation targeting. The Financial Development Index is very low for all of them, which means that they don't have any high level of financial market. The government balance of most of them are negative, even in 2010 to 2013 or 2014 to 2017. So which means that the government has a deficit in these countries. And of course, the central bank independence shows, especially for some countries like, for example, India or some other countries like Vietnam, the central bank, it's not independent, it's dependent. So which means that the result reveal at least 3 important points here. The first one is that relatively dependent central bank, we can see here, a high level of budget deficit that makes them heavily reliant to the seniorage, or we have a fiscal dominance. And the third one is they have not a well-developed financial market. So these 3 very soon tell us that these countries don't have the basic requirements for adopting implicit price stability, because implicit price stability needs at first a very good financial market, and second, the central bank should be independent, and we don't have it. So, which means that this one, implicit price stability, is not a good choice of inflation targeting for these countries. Between full-fledged and light inflation targeting, light inflation targeting doesn't have enough commitment to the anchor. It's very important for us, because if we don't have any commitment to the anchor, we cannot conduct monetary policy very well. So, and accountability to the public is not very good, it's not very high. So, this means that the central bank in this inflation targeting in light cannot maintain inflation as the most important objective of the central bank, because the government can change it very soon. And this regime can be used just for a transient period from non-inflation targeting to inflation targeting. But with some strong institutional agreements to improve credibility of the central bank, full-fledged can be the best choice of inflation targeting for these countries. And as a conclusion, this study revealed 2 important points. The first one, and based on the econometric model, the inflation targeting is superior to the exchange rate and monetary aggregate targeting. This means that inflation is a better anchor for conducting monetary policy. And based on the descriptive statistic, and of course, the definition that we have from inflation targeting regimes, the full-fledged inflation targeting can be the best choice among the inflation targeting regimes for the southern countries. Thank you.